Mark entered the cafe without expectation, escaping the quiet of his apartment, where silence had grown heavy. Inside, warmth embraced him, and the soft glow of lamps spilled across wooden tables, while outside rain blurred the streets into watery lines. He sat by the window and allowed himself to simply be, noticing the rhythm of raindrops, the muted hum of distant conversations, and the subtle play of shadows across the floor. For the first time in weeks, he was fully present, neither thinking of work nor obligations, only aware of the fragile moment unfolding around him, delicate yet insistent. Life had felt like an unbroken cycle, each day a mirror of the last. Commuting, brief interactions, evenings that seemed empty despite their routine. But tonight something felt different. A quiet tension had shifted, and he noticed details in the world he usually overlooked. The faint shimmer of wet asphalt, the way light pooled in corners, the small movements of patrons around him. Each detail seemed to carry significance, an unspoken promise that ordinary moments could suddenly feel new and alive. By the time he left, the rain had eased, leaving the streets glistening under lamplight. He walked slowly, sensing an unnameable shift inside himself, a hint of something fragile beginning. Nothing had been promised, no plans made, yet the evening left him with a quiet anticipation, a gentle reminder that beginnings often arrive without warning and that even ordinary nights could quietly change the shape of life. The next morning, Mark woke with a lingering sense of the previous evening pressing gently against his mind. His room felt the same, yet somehow heavier, as if the quiet had absorbed some invisible memory. He lay still, staring at the ceiling, aware of the soft light filtering through the blinds, and tried to trace the subtle shift inside himself. The memory of the cafe, the rain, the calm presence of someone else, replayed in fragments that refused to be ignored. It was a quiet insistence, a small ripple of awareness that demanded attention without a word. The day moved forward, ordinary in appearance, yet Mark found himself observing differently. Small details seemed to matter more. The way shadows fell across the sidewalk, the fleeting expressions of strangers, the rhythm of his own steps echoing in familiar streets. Every fragment of thought or sight reminded him of the brief, unspoken connection he had felt, leaving him with a mixture of curiosity and cautious anticipation. He realized that life, which had often felt flat and predictable, might hold sudden moments that could shift perception if only one was willing to notice. As evening approached, he wandered back toward the cafe without planning to. The streets glimmered from a lingering drizzle, lamps reflecting in wet puddles, and the world felt slightly altered, as if waiting. He paused outside the entrance, inhaling the scent of rain and warm air spilling from inside, considering whether to step in or remain an observer. It did not matter what he decided. Even the hesitation held meaning, a small proof that subtle choices could carry weight. By the time he returned home, the quiet of his apartment felt different, less oppressive, touched by a soft anticipation that hinted at beginnings yet unseen. That evening, Mark walked through the quiet streets with a strange sense of anticipation. The city seemed altered, softer somehow, each street lamp and wet pavement reflecting more than just light. He did not have a plan, nor did he expect anything to happen, yet he felt drawn to the familiar cafe as though some unspoken force guided his steps. The faint scent of rain mingled with the warmth drifting from inside, and he paused for a moment, letting the atmosphere sink into him. It was a sensation he had not felt in years, a quiet awareness that something ordinary might shift into the extraordinary without warning. Inside, the cafe was alive with soft murmurs and the gentle clinking of cups, but the moment felt suspended between minutes. Mark noticed small gestures around him, the subtle sway of someone's movement, the tilt of a chair, the way shadows danced on the walls. His attention kept returning to these details, each one a small thread weaving the scene together. The world outside continued as always, yet within these walls, time seemed to stretch, leaving him fully present in a space that felt intimate and yet undefined. It was a fragile sensation, delicate as a whispered secret, and he clung to it with quiet wonder. When he stepped outside again, the rain had begun anew, soft and persistent, coating the streets with reflective silver. Mark walked slowly, aware of the rhythm of his own footsteps, the distant hum of the city, and the faint echo of the evening's calm that had followed him. He realized that moments like these were fleeting, yet they left traces that could alter perception long after the fact. Something new was beginning to take shape inside him, subtle, unspoken, and entirely unforeseen. And for the first time in a long while, he felt that life might hold more than routine, that ordinary nights could quietly shift into something remarkable. The following day, Mark found himself replaying fragments of the previous evenings over and over in his mind. The memory of the cafe, the gentle rain, and the fleeting presence of someone else lingered like a faint melody he could not forget. Ordinary routines suddenly seemed different, tinted with the potential of possibility. Even simple acts, like walking down familiar streets or watching the sunlight catch on window panes, felt imbued with meaning he had not noticed before. Each moment carried the weight of expectation without promise, leaving him both unsettled and intrigued. By evening, he returned to the same streets almost instinctively. The city had a quiet rhythm, each footstep echoing in the damp air, every glimmer of light reflecting off wet surfaces like small invitations. Mark moved without haste, savoring the subtle interplay of sound and shadow, noticing things he had ignored for years. The curve of a lamp post, the pattern of falling raindrops, the distant murmur of someone's laughter. In these details, he began to sense a delicate narrative forming around him, one that required neither words nor explanation, but insisted on being acknowledged. When he arrived at the cafe, the doors swung gently as he entered, and the familiar warmth wrapped around him. Though no extraordinary events occurred, he felt a growing awareness inside himself, a realization that small, imperceptible moments could carry significance far beyond their surface. He lingered for a while, absorbing the atmosphere, and left with the quiet sense that his life had subtly shifted. Something unspoken was taking root, a possibility he could not name, yet one that promised to alter the way he perceived the ordinary and invited him to embrace the unexpected. The following morning, Mark woke with the soft echo of the previous nights still lingering in his mind. The memory of the cafe, the rain, and that brief, unspoken connection seemed to pulse gently beneath the surface of his routine. Even the sunlight filtering through his blinds felt charged, as though the world had subtly shifted overnight. He moved through familiar tasks with a heightened awareness, noticing details that had once gone unnoticed. The pattern of shadows on the wall, the way the air felt warmer near the window, the faint hum of distant traffic that seemed to carry its own rhythm. Life, usually so predictable, had acquired a new texture, and he felt both cautious and curious about what it might bring. By afternoon, he found himself wandering without purpose, drawn to streets he had walked countless times, yet now seemed different. Every puddle reflected more than light, every lamp post cast a subtle glow, and each passing figure carried an unspoken story he imagined with quiet fascination. He noticed how ordinary moments could suddenly feel layered, imbued with significance that had previously escaped him. The world seemed suspended, holding its breath, inviting him to pay attention to nuances he had long ignored. Each step felt deliberate, as if he were navigating both the city and the subtle shift growing within himself. Evening arrived with a gentle drizzle, and Mark's path led him back to the cafe almost unconsciously. Inside, warmth and soft murmurs greeted him, yet the experience was no longer just about the space around him. It was about the awareness growing quietly inside. He felt a delicate anticipation, an unspoken tension that hinted at possibilities not yet realized. Though nothing extraordinary occurred, he left with a sense of subtle change, as if each ordinary action had been quietly transformed by the mere act of noticing, and he understood that life could be quietly reshaped by moments small enough to go unseen, yet potent enough to. Mark woke the next morning with a quiet tension lingering in his chest, a reminder of the nights before. The memory of the cafe and the soft, persistent rain wove through his thoughts, subtle yet insistent. He moved through his apartment slowly, noticing the way light fell across familiar furniture, how shadows shifted with the morning sun, and the soft hum of distant traffic. Ordinary objects seemed alive in a new way, each carrying small significance that had once gone unnoticed. Life felt altered, as if the hours themselves held hidden layers waiting to be discovered. By midday, he found himself wandering the familiar streets again, drawn by a force he could not name. The drizzle had left the pavement slick, reflecting the glow of street lamps in odd, shimmering patterns. Each step felt measured, deliberate, as though he were following an unseen current guiding him through moments previously overlooked. The city's familiar rhythm seemed subtly altered, and with each passing shadow and sound, he felt a growing awareness of the delicate tension between what was ordinary and what might unexpectedly shift beneath the surface. As evening arrived, Mark approached the cafe with an odd mix of anticipation and calm. The doors opened to a warm, welcoming glow, yet he did not rush inside. He paused for a moment, letting the atmosphere sink in, and felt the subtle pull of something unspoken taking shape within him. Though nothing outwardly remarkable occurred, he left with the quiet understanding that life could change in almost imperceptible ways, that small moments carried weight beyond their appearance, and that paying attention might reveal possibilities he had long overlooked. The morning arrived with a pale, diffused light that seemed to touch everything softly, revealing details Mark had never noticed. The memory of the cafe and the quiet connection he had felt there remained, like a faint glow beneath his thoughts. Even the simplest actions, pouring coffee, opening a window, tying his shoes, carried a weight he hadn't expected. Shadows stretched across the floor, and the familiar creaks of his apartment seemed almost musical, each note a reminder that ordinary moments could hold significance if one chose to notice. The world around him had gained depth, subtle and unassuming, yet undeniably present. By afternoon, Mark wandered through streets that had once felt unremarkable. Rain had left the pavement glistening, reflecting the shifting sky above, and he noticed the patterns of puddles and light with quiet fascination. People passed by, moving with their own rhythms, yet he observed them differently, as though their gestures and glances were threads in a larger, invisible tapestry. Each step he took carried a sense of purpose, though he had no plan, guided only by a growing awareness that ordinary moments could shift perception if he allowed himself to truly see them. Evening approached, and he found himself near the cafe once more. The familiar warmth and muted sounds greeted him, but he lingered outside for a moment, absorbing the atmosphere. Nothing outwardly dramatic occurred, yet he felt the subtle pull of change growing inside. Life's possibilities seemed more present, yet delicate, like glass waiting to be touched. Walking home afterward, he felt an almost imperceptible anticipation, a quiet sense that small, unseen events could ripple through days, leaving traces that altered how he experienced the world, hinting at beginnings yet to reveal themselves. The following morning, Mark awoke with a subtle tension still lingering, a quiet reminder of nights that had left their mark. Light filtered gently through the blinds, painting thin lines across the floor, and even the simplest motions felt heavier with awareness. Pouring coffee, adjusting his coat, stepping outside, each act carried a small significance that had previously gone unnoticed. The world seemed richer, almost intimate, and he realized that noticing these tiny details created a sense of connection he had long forgotten, a delicate thread tying him to moments that might otherwise slip by unnoticed. As the day unfolded, he wandered through familiar streets with a newfound attentiveness. The rain had left reflections on the pavement that shimmered in patterns only visible if one looked closely. People passed by, absorbed in their routines, yet he observed them with a subtle curiosity, imagining the silent stories they carried. Every sound, every movement, seemed imbued with faint meaning, like pieces of an unseen puzzle that only revealed themselves to those willing to notice. Each step felt deliberate, a rhythm that connected him both to the streets and to the quiet shift taking place inside. By evening, he approached the cafe once again, drawn by a pull he could not define. The warm glow within, the muted conversations, the scent of coffee and wood, all wrapped around him like a familiar embrace. He lingered for a moment, inhaling the atmosphere and feeling the subtle weight of possibility pressing gently against his awareness. Nothing dramatic occurred, yet the night held a quiet promise, a sense that ordinary evenings could harbor unseen changes, and that paying attention might uncover moments capable of reshaping the texture of his days in ways he had long stopped expecting. The next morning, Mark awoke to the soft hum of the city outside, the familiar sounds carrying a new weight. Light spilled across his room in delicate patterns, tracing shapes he had never truly noticed. Even simple movements, reaching for a book, straightening his jacket, stepping onto the street, felt imbued with significance. Each action seemed deliberate, and the quiet awareness inside him had grown, a subtle undercurrent that threaded his thoughts and made ordinary moments feel unexpectedly vivid. The world, once dull and predictable, now hinted at possibilities hidden in plain sight. Throughout the day, he wandered without aim, yet each turn and step seemed meaningful, as though the city itself was guiding him. The rain-slicked pavement reflected the soft glow of lamps and windows, patterns shifting with the light. Faces passed by, brief glances and gestures unnoticed by most, yet Mark found them fascinating, as if fragments of a story only he could see. Every sound and movement felt layered, and he understood that paying attention to these nuances could reveal dimensions of life he had long ignored, small threads connecting him to a quiet, unfolding rhythm. By evening, he arrived at the cafe again, drawn by a familiarity he could neither explain nor resist. The warmth and muted chatter welcomed him, yet he lingered outside for a moment, letting the atmosphere settle around him. Nothing outwardly remarkable occurred, but he felt the pull of subtle change, a quiet anticipation that lingered beneath the surface. As he walked home afterward, each step felt measured, deliberate, aware, a recognition that life's small, unnoticed moments could quietly transform perception, hinting at possibilities that had been there all along, waiting for attention. Mark woke with a lingering sense of quiet expectation, the memories of previous nights still threading through his thoughts. The sunlight falling across the room seemed more vivid, touching surfaces he had long ignored. The curve of a chair, the subtle grain of the wooden floor, the way dust motes danced in a single shaft of light. Ordinary moments had begun to feel layered, each carrying a hidden significance he had never allowed himself to notice before. He moved through the morning with an unusual attentiveness, aware of every small motion, every shift in the air, as if life itself were waiting for him to acknowledge it. The afternoon found him wandering familiar streets with a careful, deliberate pace. Rain had left the pavement glistening, reflecting the soft hues of the sky and the flickering lamps above. Passers-by moved with quiet purpose, their gestures fleeting yet captivating, as if each person carried a secret story he was only beginning to glimpse. Mark observed with a patience he had not known he possessed, letting every sight, sound, and shadow settle into his awareness. He realized that the ordinary, when truly noticed, could carry subtle power, shifting perception in ways that were imperceptible yet profound. By evening, he approached the cafe once more, drawn by an unspoken familiarity. The warm glow, the scent of coffee, and the low hum of conversation welcomed him, yet he paused outside to absorb it fully. Nothing overtly remarkable occurred, but he felt the quiet pull of possibility inside himself. A subtle tension that suggested new beginnings could emerge without warning. Walking home afterward, each step felt deliberate and meaningful, a reminder that life could transform in imperceptible ways, that small, unnoticed moments could leave enduring traces, and that the world often offered shifts long before one recognized their significance. Mark awoke to a morning that felt both ordinary and quietly charged, as though the world had subtly shifted overnight. The familiar light spilled across his apartment, highlighting details he had never paused to notice. The worn edges of a book, the faint pattern of sunlight on the floor, the gentle sway of a curtain in the breeze. Each gesture of his routine, brushing his teeth, brewing coffee, tying his shoes, carried a delicate significance. He moved through these small actions with an attentiveness he had not known before, feeling the quiet pull of possibility threading through the mundane. Life, once predictable, had acquired a new texture, subtle and persistent, pressing gently against his awareness. By afternoon, he wandered through streets he had traversed countless times, yet now they seemed alive with hidden patterns. Rain had left the pavements glimmering, capturing reflections that shifted with the moving light, and every passerby seemed momentarily important, each glance and gesture a fragment of stories he could only imagine. Shadows stretched across walls and alleyways, playing across familiar surfaces in ways that made the ordinary feel layered, intricate. Mark recognized that these small details, when fully observed, could shift perception, infusing the everyday with significance he had long overlooked. Evening found him at the cafe again, its warm glow spilling into the street, inviting yet familiar. He lingered outside, breathing in the scent of coffee and the subtle murmur of voices, letting the atmosphere imprint itself on him. Nothing dramatic occurred, but he felt the gentle pull of change growing quietly inside, a sense that unnoticed moments could quietly alter his inner landscape. Walking home afterward, he noticed every footstep, every reflection in the pavement, each sound from the distant city carrying weight. The world, he realized, was full of small, transformative moments, waiting patiently for recognition.